All right, welcome to our latest Kimmons Wilson School Research Forum. And this time, we're going into our fifth year with these research forums. And today we're joined by another excellent guest to talk to us about esports and the role of esports in the sport industry, the entertainment industry, and in our society on a greater level. And so I want to welcome Arwina Mogul, founder and CEO of Beam.gg. She's here today. She's going to talk about some of her background, how she got to where she is. We'll have a conversation about esports, and then finish with looking at the future and how esports will help push sport consumerism forward and entertainment consumerism forward. So with that, let me welcome Arwina, and I will let you take it away. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cody, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be, presenting, ideas about the space, my experience, my journey within esports. So just to introduce my company is called Beam.gg, and what we do is we build online community management software applications specifically for the esports and gaming industries. So our ideal, users are brands, established brands and organizations within the space, or US businesses with gaming activities. So this could be anywhere from gaming studios to gaming publishers to schools to firms and to teams and to content creators who have a large customer or membership base, and they want to just take it to the next level and want to convert more of their casual fans into super fans. And I'm sure you've heard about this a lot in esports, where there's a massive upside when it comes to, advertising, because most of, the millennial generation don't really respond to traditional advertising. There's more, different ways that you can advertise in esports, and it's definitely much more unique than what traditional advertising has been. Because esports is so broad. In sports, there's typically like, a set amount numbers of sports that you can, list. But in esports, there's just tons of games that's just coming out every single year, where people, get involved, and people love to play the game and they love to watch the game. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that's our company, and those are, our typical customers, our typical users.
And if you could let us know a little bit about your background, how you got to founder and CEO, and a little bit of information for the students.
For sure. So a little bit of a background to me. I actually did not go to school for business or technology. I actually went for school for social sciences. So, my principle in life is helping people. And I thought, okay, social sciences sounds good. Um, and as soon as I graduated school, I actually landed a job with the government. So that kind of kept me busy for a while. But before all of this, before, college, before university, I was actually a huge nerd. I love to code and I love to play video games. I actually, right before school, I was so interested in, World of Warcraft, vanilla. This was like really a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And basically I swore off games because I wanted to, finish school. But as soon as I graduated and 1 or 2 years into my full-time job out of school, I said, I really want to pick up back on gaming. And then I started to play video games. And this was around 2011, where Valve Corporation said that they were going to do a $1 million prize pool for Dota 2. Dota 2 is a MOBA game. It's been around for a while. There was Dota 1, and that was actually under Blizzard. And what essentially happened was it just caught my interest. Like, I personally believe that it is the first, kind of, it was a very historic moment for esports. It was a moment where I think esports really was put on the radar because it was being treated like a sporting event, like a sporting tournament. So this was around 2011, and it's like past, but during that time, I got into industry by just volunteering and doing my own freelance projects. And through that, I actually started to work with Valve. I started to work with Red Bull, with AMD, with Logitech Gaming. And it was just honestly grit and perseverance. And when you're in your early 20s, I would say you're a bit naive. I was naive back then, hitting up all the executives, hitting up their directors and telling them, hey, I have this team or I have this project. Like, I think I could really, make you money. And because really that's, the conversation that you're going to have when you're trying to ask for sponsorships or you're trying to ask for funding. And I got lucky. And I would say that it's also because I worked really hard to reach out to them. But I did reach out to tons of people, like thousands of different companies. And I ended up working with some of the best leading industry leaders. So when that happened, I also started working on a project called Daily Esports. Later on, it was basically my first ever startup. And what that did was we actually made viral gaming memes and viral articles and content. And it was really successful because we worked on zero budget, but we ended up reaching 4 million unique users every single week. And this was, like I said, 10 years ago. So 4 million unique users every single week 10 years ago is a pretty big deal. And that's on zero budget. And you know how we actually were able to get it to go viral? I've actually never mentioned this before. So I would say this is a secret sauce that I'm sharing with you all. But and this is very relevant to your demographic. We made viral memes that we knew that people would share. And in that viral meme, it said, share or forward this mango so that you can pass your exams. And we published this, right before exam time. So it just went crazy. Like it went viral. And the mango is actually an in-game item. Of course, it has to be gaming specific, but we saw that there were other industries that were passing it on, like the beauty industry, or anything that wasn't even related to gaming, it was passing it on. So it's really just thinking outside the box, plus thinking about who your demographic is. So we thought, okay, this is the demographic is our students or young professionals, and what can we do to get them to forward this kind of content. So that's kind of like our claim to fame, that viral meme. If you Google enchanted mango, we're first page, still to this day first page. So anyways, we ended up selling um, to a public Canadian gaming company. Um, and through that venture of mine, through that startup, I actually started to work with a business partner. He later on headhunted me to work on the world's first esports theme park. So I guess there's a learning, experience here where, um, whenever you have a customer facing role, you really don't know who that customer may be. So if you do a really good job, there's a very high chance that if it's the right person, they may open up doors for you later on. So that's what he did. He didn't even there was no interview or anything like that. He was like, I want you for this project. This starts here. I can also say that it's probably one of the best, kind of contracts I've ever did. I traveled for that, and I was working overseas for a while, and I was responsible for recruiting the team that's supposed to be leading up the esports theme park, the strategic plan, and a lot more other things. One of the bigger undertakings would be the event calendar. The event calendar with profit and loss statements, just like forecasting for the next 3 years, all of that. I started to get a lot of experience in those areas. Um, and before I get to the final stage, so we've already talked about like what I went to school for, my first job, how I started in the field, and how my first startup got formed. Now, I'm talking about the esports theme park. And in the esports theme park, I actually met another a colleague of mine, and she actually just finished her MBA from Columbia, I think about a year ago. And she was telling me over the phone, I think a few months ago, she said, you know, I got a call from my dream job, and the reason why they even called me? And it's because the esports experience that she had. And that's really very insightful, because she didn't necessarily have to go to school for a full-fledged esports program, or have 5 years, but just like have a high level understanding of what esports is, and that got her at least her foot in the door with her dream job. So and I feel like anyone can do that. Like I said, if you just kind of put yourself out there, you will be able to get that experience. And people love getting help. So it's kind of like a great learning experience as well, and very insightful from her. So after I finished my gig with the esports theme park, I didn't want to stay there any longer, because I really wanted to build my second startup, and that's Beam. After the theme park, I've been working on Beam since 2018. We are, like I said, based here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, but we do service the US primarily, and then Canada as a secondary market. And I hope that kind of it covers the whole journey from, how I got started to, what I'm doing now.
And there is so much great information that you just shared, that I was trying to jot down questions, and just based on what you said, and I got lost with all the great information. But there's one thing that struck me is you talked about the creating that viral moment. And we talk about that in our classes, especially our marketing classes. We'll talk about kind of the breaking, the tipping point, when something goes viral or something becomes popular, and being prepared for that and what to do after that. And so it was real interesting. You talked about kind of the thought process behind creating that viral moment. And obviously we also talk about segmentation and knowing your markets. And so thank you for saying that it's very important to know your markets. An interesting observation is, after you had the viral moment, how did you keep it going? So how could you continue to grow the business? How could you continue to grow the interest after that initial moment?
So, what we had planned already in advance was basically a couple of experiments, a couple of experiments of different activities, different content. Um, I think what a lot of creators do is they create, viral memes, but they may not be as engaging. So, for example, it doesn't bring on a sense of community through that post, because it was, pass this on. It's pretty self centered. I'm passing this on because I want to pass my exams. So the next kind of content experiments that we were doing was you know, share your favorite game moments. That's one that we did that was good. But we took it a step further and asked, you know, what have you ever fell in love with, you know, someone else during a game? Or like, did you meet your significant other through video games? And other ones would be like, what is, you know, your proudest achievement in gaming? Show us your score. So when they see posts like that, they're, you know, encouraged to share their own personal experience. And then that actually builds a relationship with the brand. And that would just get you more eyeballs at the end of the day. And as you know, like when it comes to social media, their friends could see it too, other people could see it, so that just encourages more people to participate as well. Plus, I think what a lot of people don't realize is when it comes to social media, you do have to hype yourself up. um, and especially when you're in business, I know a lot of people do the initial hype train at the very start. So, for example, you post a content, go on your personal account, post on it, like comment on it, you know. I think a lot of people think are a little bit adverse to that because they think maybe it's not authentic, but that's actually some of like that's actually how some of the, you know, most popular brands in the world get started. At least the ones that, you know, didn't spend like millions of dollars at the very start of their campaign. But you do have to, you know, kind of really put yourself out there, and also like get your family, get your friends to comment on it and all of those things. And especially, you know, talk to other people about it, like, what do you think of this? Like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. When you're building a brand like that, especially if you like you're a marketing manager or community manager, you have to kind of think like an entrepreneur. um, and typically I would say that would make you very successful because those engagements, those interests would just compound over time if you keep on putting in the work every single day.
Thank you. And this next question, and I'll combine it with another one. This next question may be a step back for people who are not as familiar with what esports is, and may cause a few eye rolls amongst our students. I'm not sure so this question may be more helpful for faculty or others. I don't know. But can you give us a brief description for the people who are not familiar? What constitutes esports? So what esports is, and then also talk about this idea of an esports theme park, because that's something I have not heard of, and it's something that seems incredibly interesting.
Absolutely. So I always get this question, you know, what is esports? Um, and my answer changes every single time because it depends on who you're talking to as well. So if it's the general public, I would say esports is the nature of competitive gaming. However, it's more than that. Esports is when a group of people watch another group of people play video games. Or esports could be someone putting together a league at a local level or a national level or international level so that they can get people to play and to participate and you know, get people to, you know, win prize pools. So there's a lot of different descriptions. I think it's more of like a list, but I would say if I were to pick one description, it's the nature of people playing of people watching other people play video games. Um, and the esports theme park, there's actually a lot of, and there's a trend actually of uh, esports, you know, venues popping up. There's a lot across Europe. There's even more in Asia, of course, where all of this kind of started. In North America, I don't want to name drop, but there's a couple of different entities that are looking to, build up a lot of different esports arenas, esports venues, and esports stadiums. They range anywhere from like 100 people to 15,000 people for an esports specific venue. Um, the project that I did, esports theme park, it's called Virtuosity. It's in the Middle East, and it's basically it's more than just an arena. It has kind of like a nostalgic memory lane down when was the first video game ever created, consoles. It has escape rooms. It has a studio for content creators. So it's kind of like a little bit for everyone that encompasses both esports and gaming, because in esports, you can safely say that everyone in esports are gamers. So you have people creating content, you have people playing video games competitively, you have people creating events, gaming events for people to participate in, and then you have people who are watching other people play video games. So that's kind of just like what the general demographic is. A couple of other things about the esports theme park: it had kind of like a Coliseum space where it can interchange between an internet, kind of like an internet cafe, like a really large one, to um, a viewing arena, so kind of like a Coliseum.
And one thing that is abundantly clear so far is just the level of importance people place in gaming and place in esports, or place on esports. And so, can you expand a little bit? Tell us a little bit about the role and importance of esports in our society.
So I'm obviously biased, right? So as a company and myself personally, we do believe in the future of esports. We believe that esports is the future of entertainment. And I think just from everything that's happened this year, I think a lot of people would agree that gaming has definitely helped them cope with isolation. So I think last year or 2 years ago, the WHO actually said that video games are, addictions. But this year they said that it's a great pastime for people to get back into so that they don't feel isolated during the pandemic. So I think right there answers, your question of how, important video games and esports could be, especially for the people who watch sports traditionally. They actually started to look at esports because there was nothing else to watch, and now they're finding that, okay, it's actually free to watch esports. I can watch it all the time, and the commentators, the presenters are really good. They know how to kind of cast play by plays. They talk about the history of the team, the history of the players. It's a full production similar to a lot of other sporting events. So I think on a deeper level, what makes esports very important is because of its accessibility. We could, let's just say that we don't have our cameras on, we could compete. I wouldn't know who you were, but I would know, like, if you were really good at playing XYZ character and I would play ABC character, and we could be the best of friends just based on like how great our teamwork could be. And that is, I think, like, is one of the greatest reasons why esports would be the future of entertainment, because you could literally have a generational family play against each other, but you can't really do that with sports, right? Like you can't do that with anything that's physical. um, it's a great way to, also, uh, uh, resolve any medical conditions as well. There's actual video games made as a prescription. It was just approved, I think, about a month or two ago, where prescription for ADHD was approved, and it's a video game. Like, the doctor's actually going to say, hey, play X amount of video game, of this specific video game for X amount of hours. So, but let's just like focus on the esports side right now. Um, it also opens up a lot of career opportunities for people. And the beauty of it is you don't have to go necessarily go back to school for a full program. Maybe it's a course or a certificate, or like maybe a graduate degree or something like that, where you can get, hands-on and, theoretical like esports knowledge and experience. So there's definitely a lot of benefits to the community on a macro and micro level. Um, One of the stat that I like to bring in is that when esports tournaments are actually held in your city, they bring in multi-million dollars into your economy. So from the government standpoint, esports is great. It brings in over $10 million to your local economy. Esports, is helping a lot of people cope with, isolation during COVID. It opens up career opportunities. I think I've sold it enough by now. I think.
Well, and you've done an amazing job of addressing what esports is, what the role of esports is. And one thing I kept hearing more and more is that those connections, and how important connections are, and how important, especially they are now. They will, and always be important. They've always been important in the past, but during our current situation, how important those connections are now. And that extends into anything. If you're a fan of anything, or you participate in esports, you're a fan of a team or specific brand, or you consume comic books or things like that. Those connections are so important for people. And by the way, if we were playing, you mentioned you would know if I were really good or not. It would take you about 2 seconds to know that I would be horrible. But the you mentioned, or
I'm
I
sure
was
it's not
thinking,
that bad.
I have not played in a very, very long time. Um, the You mentioned the or we talked about the connections, and I'm really interested, um, for my own research purposes, on I research and I write about group behavior and in-group and out-group behavior, how people treat each other in different groups. What are some of the positive outcomes and negative outcomes associated with people participating in esports? And in particular, what I'm really getting at is the kind of, if people call it trash talking or whatever, but the amount of talking people do, and the type of talking people do during competitions. What examples have you seen, and what do you think are kind of the positives and negatives that come from that?
Oh yeah, so I think the positives is the learning experience for sure, and that it happens when esports is not yet at the very top of mainstream, because let's face it, it's not, at the very top. Not everyone in the world watches esports the same way they watch sports, right? Or they watch entertainment shows. So when things like these happen, so for example, if a player or a team acts, negatively, is against sportsmanship, it's embarrassing sometimes when that happens, because that kind of shows you that the industry is very I would say not a great environment for brands or organizations to invest into. And because of that, I also believe that's the reason why it hasn't been heavily invested into, because of things like that. So most of the time, it's actually getting better. There's a lot of screening and assessments for the players and for the teams, but there's also, for example, content creators who are very famous in esports. And I think this year a lot of people have uncovered and unpacked a lot of, behind the scenes stories about, their negative experiences, from sexual harassment to sexual assault to, just being treated unfairly, or someone using their position of power. Mind you, we're talking about, 16 to 30-year-olds, right? So they're kind of in that stage where they're still kind of discovering themselves. And like I said, when you're in your early 20s, sometimes you are very naive or overconfident. So that's when you really have to, and if I could, relive my early 20s, I would definitely do it differently. Um, Relive, kind of those experiences and focus on, how you react and how you behave around people, because you really don't know who has your best interests in mind. And it is a kind of small of a community, so there's only a few big players. So if worked with someone in the industry, there's a very big chance that you may end up working with them again in 5 or 10 years. um, so because of that, I think the industry definitely needs more, coaching and just more discussions around behaviors. I think, just as as a main example of what I was talking about. So for example, teams could also potentially do max match fixing. So that's pretty bad. Or and they're, potentially purposely losing, so that when people bet, and betting is, I think that's a whole separate subject to unpack. But esports betting has increased because not only sometimes you can bet with cash, but sometimes you can bet with in-game currency, in-game items. So it has definitely seen an uptick. So it actually negatively affected the esports scene, because people, teams would purposely lose to, gain more money for whoever's betting against them, right? So I think it's just the thing that I always think about the most is, when it comes to esports, you're kind of looking at it where it's when sports was just starting out, or even like in the time of in Rome and Italy, where you have the Colosseum and you have people fighting in the arena. Like, it's literally at that stage. But then we're in 2020, so you can't really ignore that. So you have the modern, infrastructure, the modern, opinions, but then you also have this very new industry. So it's kind of like meshing all together. So there's obviously some growing pains there.
Well, and I could imagine because it is it is a new industry, and like you pointed out, as industries emerge, and a lot of the industries that we think of now, the contemporary sport industry that we think of now, has been around for so long that um, there are, as you call them, growing pains. But there are things that, regulations have to catch up, and regulating bodies have to make rules, and then you're constantly seeing um, this kind of high wire act, if you will, of um, what's being done, and how the regulators are catching up, and how they're trying to address it, and then how people are getting around that. So I could imagine that now, because we are in 2020, and because we are in the position we are as a society, you are seeing an industry grow exponentially quicker than, and having to deal with those issues exponentially quicker than you have pretty much any other entertainment industry before. Um, Another thing that I think is interesting for, particularly for the students, we talk about being a um, critical observer, or paying attention to looking at how things are done. Earlier, you had mentioned the advertising dollars in esport, and that, along with the financial ramifications of having an esport tournament in your city. Those are huge. The advertising dollars that are coming into esports are huge, and especially when you have things like on demand and you have where people aren't watching live television, you have product placement everywhere. Could you just give a few examples for the students on how things are advertised within a game? So like the product placement, or how advertisers and how companies can get their messages out to participants and consumers.
Absolutely. So why don't I split this into two parts? So the first part is virtual and the second part is physical. So there you go. That's the first, unique identifier in esports advertising. There's virtual and there's physical. And when I say virtual, I'm not talking about social media. I'm not talking about logos on banners or anything like that. I'm talking about, for example, let's um, choose BMW as a car because they actually sponsored, they actually invested into esports, invested advertising dollars. So what they can do is they can actually have the BMW logo in the game itself. So when your team, let's just say the BMW sponsored team, plays in a tournament and it's an international tournament, and mind you, there's billions of minutes that are watched for every single tournament, and those numbers are like also in the millions in terms of unique users, unique viewers. This amount of people can actually see your logo when they're watching the screen. So very similar to, like, for example, if you're watching a basketball game and you know how there's like advertising on the, I don't watch sports so much, but there's advertising on the bleachers, on the sides of the court. Um, Basically in games, it's just like that too, but it's expanded because your team can have virtual goods as well. So for example, let's take the game Dota. Dota 2 has the highest price pool in esports. I believe they gave out $35 million last year for one single tournament. Um, so when your team goes into the game and people are watching them, they see there's a banner, the team banner with BMW on it. And then they see like certain clothes on the character, so not clothes but armor basically, and it has the logos of the sponsors as well. Another thing is when we go to the digital realm, the players themselves, when they stream, which is, it's kind of like watching LeBron James, play basketball. Wouldn't that be cool? And he's talking to you on a live stream. That would be honestly very cool. But so let's talk about this BMW sponsored team, and one of the players are playing a video game, maybe Fortnite or League of Legends, and obviously you see the appeal in going on your computer or on your phone and like talking to this player, right? So on the screen, you could also see, the BMW logo there. Maybe he's streaming from his BMW. There's just so much, like it's basically an athlete and an influencer already packaged in one from the get-go, because not every athlete is, the influencer type, or they maybe they don't want to do that. But almost every player streams, especially when they're off games. Like if they have breaks in between tournaments, they always stream. And the team itself can get, their players to do certain things like product placement, product videos, stuff like that. It's always in their contract. Um, that's actually where most of the revenues also, that comes from, within a team. There's obviously a management fee, but most of the prize pools do, if you're with a good team, a good organization, most of the pools actually go to the player. So it's not like a 50-50 split or anything like that. So let's talk about the physical part. Merch, very easy. Um, People love to buy jerseys the same way people also love to buy esports jerseys. So esports jerseys would have the team name, the sponsor logos, and you have obviously the merch that I'm talking about. But there's obviously, if it's like an athlete, the thing is, because it's esports, it's expanded from the traditional merchandise. So for example, shoes for basketball players, but they also have shoes for esports players. But then they also have keyboards. It makes sense because they're playing on a keyboard, or they're playing on a console. Maybe their headset is, themed. Their gaming chair. There's a lot of gaming chairs that are made as well to the team's liking, or even the game's liking. So there's a specific chair for perhaps like Overwatch, and there's a specific chair for a certain team whatsoever. So um, the advertising is definitely very expansive and creative as well. I honestly think that there's a lot more opportunities out there, for people to think of, different ways to advertise, and to be more creative. So, like I said, it's a new industry, so there's a lot of different things that you can do.
Yeah, and thank you. So next, and you have mentioned it when we were talking about the role of esports in society. Um, but in particular, right now, as we sit here, we're obviously doing this visit remote. We are visiting in August 2020. And how has esports operated in the COVID-19 pandemic, or during the COVID-19 pandemic? And also, how has it moved, not only the in-person or the live sport industry forward, but the entertainment industry forward there amid COVID-19?
Oh yeah. So I think there's a lot of news headlines saying esports on the rise, games are all at an all-time high because of COVID. But I think what people don't realize is that esports was essentially gearing towards live, right? So a lot of live events, a lot of live activities, and that all got shut down. Some of the biggest companies in esports, or I would say the OG, the initial, esports companies, they lost a lot of money. They lost like at least 45%, 35%, because they were all, gearing to basically take over the real world, because, we obviously live in the digital world when it comes to esports, and people were asking for it more and more in their real lives. So they were all gearing for it. Unfortunately, COVID happened, so they did lose a lot of money. It's obviously, I feel like the industry would bounce back sooner though. So it's not as bad as, like, for example, tourism, or like dine-in restaurants or anything like that. But there's definitely kind of like a turnaround time for them to be able to kind of like switch to more of a digital format, because they were doing that already years ago, and now they're kind of just like, oh crap, like we have to go back and start doing that, and go back to our roots, type of thing. So uh gaming, although gaming on the other hand, there's been a lot of people, going into gaming because of COVID. So I would say like they are the absolute winners when it comes to kind of like doing what they can during the pandemic, because a lot of people are more free, so they can play video games more. So the game publishers, the game studios, they're the ones who are actually kind of thriving in this environment.
Okay. And so, and you touched on this earlier as well, but what do you think the next 5 to 10 years and beyond look like for esports? What are we looking at for the future of this industry and its impact on the sport and entertainment industry?
Yeah, so I think because of COVID, there's been I would say kind of like a pushback um, to live events and maybe large gatherings. So I think they'd have to kind of like figure out a way to get around that. We don't really know when we can get past this, right? Like you can't say January 2021. You can't say next month. Like it's really hard for anyone to kind of say that. Um, so I think over the next 5 to 10 years, what I do see as a trend is there's been a lot of investments into esports, physical esports venues. So I think there's going to be an uptick there. And when you have esports venues, there's also going to be an uptick in, like grassroots type of activities in different cities, in different states. So that's also something that I think would require a lot more, investment and approvals from the local government. That this thing is happening, and you're going to start turning certain cities into like esports cities where they're proud of the team that that they have for their city. I think it's I think what's going to happen is more of like a college experience when it comes to esports. A college experience for sports is, you have, like cities and towns that are really, really proud of, their teams. And I think that's what's going to happen. I also think that there's going to be a lot more investment and a lot more applications for coaching, assessments, psychology when it comes to esports athletes. And lastly, I would say maybe I'm biased, or I think maybe this is a trend that I would hope for, but I also do see a lot more investment into like diverse esports, opportunities. So more women in like decision-making positions in esports, more women athletes. I think the big actually the big debate is, should we have women only esports tournaments, or should we have just esports tournaments? And I would definitely say that I'm leaning towards, just having esports tournaments for everyone, because esports does not include any physical, or yeah, any physical traits that you need to have. And there's been a lot of like women who win at esports tournaments, and the latest one I think that I'm super proud of, even though I don't know her or anything like that, is uh she won Hearthstone championships, and she didn't just win like 2-1 or anything like that. She won 2-0, so she won all 3 games of her final championship. She's a world championship champion as well, so there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think it's just an environment that has to be, improved on for more women to participate.
Well, it's a great segue to talk about the last question that I have for you. In your role as a leader, a founder, CEO of multiple companies, tell us about your experience being a woman in the industry and kind of getting to the place where you are CEO, and the need for, and you just touched on it, but the need for more females in leadership roles within the industry as well?
So the experience, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It wasn't a smooth, experience. I've definitely gotten a lot of pushback from everyone at any level. And I think what people are most surprised by is, up to this day, I would, get on a phone call and they would say, "Oh, I didn't know you were a girl." And it's like, when you get, that kind of answer, or that kind of greeting, it just, it kind of plays on your emotions and your confidence, right? But at the end of the day, um, there's a lot of people that you can work with. You don't have to work with someone who, perceive women like that. I think that's just the key is just to be confident, and what you want to do, and just be extremely deliberate with what you want, because I feel like most of the time, some of the experiences where I could be unprepared for a meeting and maybe I'm not very clear with what I want, and that typically turns into a bad meeting where it's open-ended and there's no clear action as a next step. So I definitely think that when you start, speaking with people in the industry, in esports, or maybe just in general, like in any male dominated field, I would say that you have to stand your ground. If they know that you're an expert and you know exactly what you want, and you know your subject pretty good, like at least like everything about like this kind of industry, or what you're working on, or what your idea is, or what you're trying to propose, then they can't really say anything. It's good to be over prepared for anything, honestly. I think preparation is success. It leads to success, because all you need is just that one opportunity, right, to kind of showcase your skills and showcase like your company or idea or project or whatever you're working on. um I still, like I said, I still get those, comments up to this day where they don't realize I'm a woman, or um they would say things like, "Oh, I booked a meeting with Arwina," because they think that Arwina is like, they don't understand that the CEO is female. So um, you would get that. Honestly, I at first, obviously, it would bother you, but at the end of the day, like I said, be deliberate with what you want. You want XYZ from this meeting, get that, and like move on. If you don't get it, or if you get it, then that's great. But that's exactly how a lot of my male counterparts would do, right? So they wouldn't get discouraged by things like that. So why should I? So yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Anything else that you would like to share with the students or anyone listening about your experiences or about the industry? Anything else you think would be helpful?
I think I kind of covered most of that in my last answer, but most of the people who do reach out to me, and ask for advice, typically they're either fresh out of high school, or they're working on something in school, and they want to be able to validate their idea and all of those things. But I think, the number one thing that uh, the reason why people fail at startups, or building their businesses, is they don't have the right team around them. And having the right team, honestly, is your key to success. If you don't have the right team, and I guess this could even apply to group work in school, if you don't have the right team, then it's very hard to move forward and achieve your milestones, right? So I would say take as much time as you need defining the people that you spend the most time with. Because right now, like for example, in any company, in any startup, um, you end up having to spend a lot of time with other people. And these people are either your co-founders or your early hires, like at least the first 10 to 20 people in your company. Um, and you always have to ask yourself, can you actually survive a 5-hour road trip with this person? And if that answer is no, then that's a red flag. But if it's yes, then, kind of probe into it more. Everything that you do, how you set up your team is, you need to surround yourself with smart people. Like, I always try to do that. Always surround yourself with smart people. Always surround yourself with people who are much better than you, because you get to learn from them, right? So I think that would be, I guess, my advice. And of course, we're a growing team. We're an early stage startup, and we're always looking for people. Like I said, we spend a lot of time with our recruitment. So if there's, students who are interested in, learning about our company and seeing if there's a fit with our company, they can send me an email. I'll leave it up to you to share my email as well.
Well, and that actually, I was going to, the last thing I was going to ask is, how can people follow you on social media? And then, yes, the students will have access to your email as well, if you don't want to give that now. But how could
Oh
how
yeah.
could students follow you?
I'm actually public on all platforms. So I'm on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/a mogul. So Arwina Mogul as a short term, not a mogul. And then on Twitter, same thing, Arwina Mogul. On Instagram, same thing, Arwina Mogul. On Twitter, I do tweet more about business, more about entrepreneurship, more about esports and gaming. And I think a lot of the people that follow me are also in the same space, and a lot of the people that I follow are also in the space as well. So if you do want to learn more about it, definitely I suggest you give me a follow. But also, one thing that we do in our company is we set up Google alerts for specific keywords. So if you're super interested in, let's just say, a niche area in esports, I definitely set up a Google alert with that. So every time something comes in, you get notified and you see what's going on in the esports world. Just, I guess, as a parting info, like I said, I just wanted to reiterate what I said earlier with my friend who, got her call from her dream job. And she already has an impressive resume. Like, she's already worked as an expat overseas. She worked in LA, and she graduated with an MBA from Columbia. So it's a pretty good resume already. But the reason why she got that call is because of that esports experience. So if you're interested in like advertising, PR, entertainment, sports, even like government bodies, I think having that, extra unique skill or experience in your resume or in your, cover letter, that you have, experience in esports and knowledge in esports, I think that really gets you to stand out from the rest. So yeah, like, feel free to follow me on social media, and also my email, arwina@beam.gg, very easy to remember. I'll definitely, and just make sure that if you are following, just if there's an option to add a note, just mention that, you're from KWS.
Okay. Well, and thank you so much for joining us, Arwina. This was a great discussion, and thank you very, very much for stopping by. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
Bye.